Hello everybody, we are Group 2, Los Pollos Hermanos, and this is our final deliverable. Our group members are Ryan Ellingston, Dean Benvenisti, Mike Moore, and Sean Lipinski. An overview of the Los Pollos Hermanos. We're a fast food chain based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We specialize in selling fried chicken throughout all of our locations in the southwestern portion of the United States. We are focusing on the processing of the chicken, and our users range all across the board from ground level employees to middle management to upper management. Inputs come from scanning barcodes, inputting the order IDs, and our screening process. By adhering to the BI system, we can turn the data into useful information and create macro decisions. Our business needs are as follows. We want to maintain product quality by monitoring the freshness of the chicken, and from this determine the best value from our suppliers. How will using the cube fulfill our business needs? The cube allows decision makers to compare the standard for inventory turnover to the reality. Further analysis allows managers to easily compare multiple products, suppliers, and orders.
We have two fact tables, order fact and bucket fact. The measures we want for order fact are amount lost, that is the total pounds of chicken that is rejected, and cost per order, which is the cost per pound of chicken that is rejected, and is based on the price for each chicken product type for each supplier. Our calculated measure for order fact is the total cost of chicken rejected, and this measure is calculated by multiplying cost per pound by the total amount lost. For bucket fact, the measures are time and inventory, which begins when a bucket is delivered from the supplier and ends when the bucket is delivered to a particular restaurant location, and expected time and inventory, which is the amount of time management predicts that a bucket should be in inventory for. We also calculate the time over or under expected time in inventory by subtracting the actual time in inventory from the expected time in inventory. The dimensions for order fact are dim chicken product, dim supplier, dim order, and dim order arrival time. Dim chicken product includes three different types of chicken: free range, indoor, and organic. Dim supplier includes the 10 vendors our company purchases chicken from. Dim order includes every single order ever placed by our company. And dim arrival time records the time each order is delivered into inventory. The hikers for dim order arrival time are date, month, and year. The dimensions for bucket fact are dim location, dim distance, dim bucket, and dim bucket creation time. Dim location has three hierarchies, which are dim location ID, dim city, and dim state. Dim distance is the distance each restaurant location is from our packaging facilities. And dim bucket includes all of the information we want to track for a particular bucket of chicken. Dim bucket creation time has three hierarchies for date, month, and the year that the bucket of chicken is created.
Now we will go into report creation within our cube with two examples. Our first example is a line graph that shows the time in inventory in blue, expected time in inventory in yellow, and the difference between the two in red throughout the 36 locations. As you can see, this would be useful in determining which locations the inventory is staying in inventory the longest, so that changes could be made to fix the locations that are struggling. Now on to our second report example. This bar graph shows the dollar amount lost from each of our 10 suppliers. This report also breaks down loss based on the type of chicken, whether it's free range, organic, or indoor. With these numbers, you can see what suppliers we received the most losses from, as well as how the losses are broken down.
That was just a very quick overview of our project, but what I'm going to go over now is the lessons that we learned in this entire process, which is important for people going forward. The first major mistake that we made was on data entry. What we did was actually completely overblow what we had to do. Our assumption was that we had to do data based exactly off of what was delivered in Deliverable 2, but that was not the case. So we spent about 5 or 6 hours creating 2,500 lines of SQL script to enter in values that both made sense and that could fill up for our reports, but that was largely unnecessary. As long as you have like 100 examples and then examples that make sense, you should be fine. So just be mindful of that. The second thing on here is pretty simple. Just test the cube. Unless you actually browse the cube, it's really hard to have a firm grasp of what's going on, and unless you go through it carefully, you have no idea if what the cube is putting out is exactly what you want. So it's important to keep that in mind. Thirdly, one major problem we ran into had to do with the data source views. You got to make sure that the impersonation information is distinguished from the SQL Server login. And usually it prompts you for this properly at the beginning, but we had it to where it was completely failing randomly, and we would have to actually go until it prompted us when we created the data source view to actually enter the impersonation information every single time. Otherwise, we couldn't get into the view. So it was very odd. So be mindful of that. Fourth, if you're making database script, be sure to save it and be sure you have updated versions of it. It makes it so much easier if you need to make changes or destroy your tables and then recreate them. Fifth is pretty straightforward but extremely important. You got to take the time to know what your company does, the processes, the dimensions that you're using, and everything that you're going to be measuring, because if you don't know that, I mean, it's hard to logically create things and create the cube. So it's extremely important that you have a firm grasp, and even if it takes you several hours to really wrap your head around what's going on, it'll save you time in the long run, because if you're trying to logically create dimensions or browse the cube and you have no idea what's going on, I mean, there's just no way you can do it. Six, you have to have it's important to have a knowledge of exactly what is local and what's on the server, because in group projects you're going to be doing a lot of work on the lab computers, and if you don't know that reports are only on that computer, or you don't know that you can access have to open the database from any other site, you got to be mindful of that, because if you don't know which one is which, then you're going to be making mistakes, you're going to be changing things where you don't want to change them. So it's really important to be mindful of exactly where you're accessing the information and whether or not it's continuing our lessons learned. Obviously, paying attention to the instructions, it goes without saying, but what we did was not do this and ended up wasting a lot of time. So be sure you know exactly, and if not, ask questions about what you need to do. Otherwise, you'll be wasting time doing something you're not supposed to, or you'll omit things that you have to do. So just pay attention. Next, we have review learn by doings. All the entire process of creating the cube and everything you need to know about the final project can be found in the learn by doings. And we go through them pretty quickly and we follow the instructions, so a lot of times you don't fully learn after one go through. So it's important to review these and just practice it. And if you do that before you go in and try to create the cube, I mean, it'll go so much faster. Because if you're just learning it for the first time as you create the cube, you'll have no chance of completing it quickly. And that goes into my next point here. Understand before attempting. Like I said, take the time to get a firm grip of everything that's going on and all the learn by doings, because once you create the tables and once you set up your database, the cube should be able to set up the cube within 30 minutes time. It's really that easy once you get used to it. Next, we have Google common errors, and one of the major setbacks we had was somehow in our calculated measures we got a comma that had appeared in the script view of it. It was a very obscure error, and I can't describe how cryptic the description of it was. It was absolutely horrible. We had no idea what was going on, and no way to fix it. So we actually ended up Googling the entire error, and sure enough, there was someone who had the exact same problem. A comma had been added, throughout the script, unbeknownst to them, and we were able to figure out how to rectify the situation. So if you get some weird error, either ask the TA, ask Joshy, or Google it and see what you can find. And finally, pick a structure and stay consistent. What I mean by that is once you determine your process, your dimensions, everything, find something that works and just stick to it. Because if you try to make changes like, oh, that doesn't make sense, you're going to be constantly in a vicious cycle of making modifications. Because a lot of times once something gets modified, you have to change something else, which becomes an absolute nightmare. So save yourself some time, pick a structure, spend some time on picking a good